As you go about upright closed chain, so up on 2 feet, walking around movements, you have this unique relationship that happens between your skull and your rib cage and your pelvis. So whatever the rib cage does, if it flexes laterally, if it extends or flexes in the sagittal plane, or if it rotates to either side, whatever the rib cage does, the skull and the pelvis are going to do the opposite. And this is done in all 3 planes of motion all at the same time as you take steps throughout your daily life, or you perform just about any other movement in your daily life, natural human upright movement. So it's important that we train that motion actively and get your body to really kind of feel into what that's like, so that you can move well, feel good, and enhance the quality of your life. So we're going to look at 3 different ways that you can actually work on improving the relationship of the pelvis, the skull, and the rib cage during side flexion, so frontal plane motion, rotation, as well as sagittal plane flexion and extension. First, we're going to start with lateral flexion, so the frontal plane of motion. What we're going to be doing is focusing on the ribs moving and only the rib cage moving. We want to keep the pelvis glued where it's at. We keep the head glued where it's at, making sure that we're not actively tilting the head to either side. We're imagining that we're keeping the eyes dead on the horizon and opening up from the ribs. Now, if this is really difficult and you find that you're just shrugging your shoulders up, you can do what I'm doing here by reaching one hand high into the sky and imagining the other arm and hand is very heavy. This will help open up the ribs. Again, don't attempt to move the head or the pelvis. They'll do so naturally in opposition to the ribs. It's the magic of this sort of natural human movement. The head and pelvis will do the opposite of what the ribs do. Next, we'll move into rotation. Once again, you can see I'm keeping my eyes and nose completely locked on the horizon and forward. My head does not rotate at all. The same for my pelvis. It stays locked forward and square. Only the ribs are moving. I really feel into that wringing out of my upper back. And again, naturally, the opposition of my head and pelvis will happen naturally. You can see that relative to my ribs, my head and pelvis rotate the other way. This exercise, this next one, is essentially a cat-camel, cat-cow, whatever, you know what I'm talking about, while laying on my back. I add in internal rotation of the shoulder joint on the flexion phase, so rounding my back and pelvis into the ground, and I perform external rotation of the shoulders on the extension of my spine and anterior tilt of my pelvis, the duck butt of the pelvis. I breathe out all of my air as I rotate the shoulders internally, and I inhale deeply as I rotate the shoulders externally. Again, I keep my eyes dead on the ceiling, right on the horizon, and attempt not to flex or extend my head, as this will happen naturally.